There comes a moment in life when you realize some people are like storms. They show up suddenly, loud and chaotic, with a mission to shake you. They carry drama like it's oxygen, criticism like it's a gift, and negativity like it's a badge of honor. And for too long, you may have stood in their rain, hoping they'd stop. But here's the truth. You can't stop the storm. You can only stop giving it your umbrella. When we talk about toxic people, the first and most important step is to truly understand what that word means. It's easy to throw it around casually, calling anyone who frustrates or challenges us toxic, but that's not the reality. The real danger comes when we confuse normal human flaws with a deeper, more corrosive pattern of behavior. Everyone has bad days. Everyone says things they regret. But toxicity is different. It's a consistent pattern of negativity, manipulation, or disrespect that chips away at your sense of peace and self-worth. These individuals are not simply having a rough season. They are locked into a way of relating to the world that thrives on control, drama, or the diminishing of others. Recognizing this difference is essential, because without clarity, you might spend years blaming yourself for their actions, thinking, if I just tried harder, they'd change. But toxic behavior is not a mirror of your worth. It's a reflection of their inner state. Understanding that allows you to step back emotionally. You stop personalizing their criticism or coldness. You start to see their words and actions for what they are, projections of their own unresolved struggles, fears and insecurities. Think about the way a child throws a tantrum. The volume, the chaos, the unreasonable demands. It can feel overwhelming in the moment. But once you realize it's not about you, you stop reacting with equal intensity. You become the calm presence in the storm, not because the noise stopped, but because you stopped making it your responsibility to control it. Adults can throw tantrums too, they just do it with sharper words, passive-aggressive digs, or a constant drip of negativity. And just like with a child, you have to recognize that the behavior is rooted in them, not in you. This shift in understanding is powerful because it breaks the cycle of emotional entanglement. Toxic people feed off reactions, your frustration, your defense, your need to explain. The moment you understand what you're dealing with, you create a mental distance that says, I see you, but I don't have to be consumed by you. And that distance doesn't make you cold, it makes you clear. It allows you to respond thoughtfully instead of reacting impulsively. Clarity is your first shield. It's like turning on a light in a dark room. You suddenly see where the furniture is, where the obstacles lie, and you can move around them without constantly stubbing your toe. When you understand toxicity for what it is, you stop tripping over it. You stop letting it define your mood, your self-esteem, or your day. You realize you can't control their storm, but you can always choose whether you walk into it. It's easy to let the presence of a toxic person consume our entire view of them, to see them as nothing but the sum of their harmful actions. But when we fall into that trap, we risk losing an important truth. People are more complex than their worst behavior. Separating the person from the behavior doesn't mean excusing what they've done. It doesn't mean letting them off the hook or pretending the harm wasn't real. It means recognizing that while their behavior might be unacceptable, it does not have to become the lens through which you view your entire relationship with them or yourself. When you see a person only as the toxic one, you keep yourself locked into a cycle of resentment. Resentment can feel righteous at first. It gives you the illusion of power, like holding on to a weapon you can swing whenever you recall the pain they've caused. But in reality, resentment is heavy. It keeps you carrying the very energy you're trying to escape. By separating who they are from what they've done, you lighten that load. You can acknowledge the harm without letting it own you. You can set boundaries without carrying bitterness like a second skin. Think about it like this. If you spill ink on a page, the whole book isn't ruined. That one page is damaged, yes. It doesn't erase the rest of the story. Seeing a toxic person through this lens doesn't mean you trust them again. It simply means you recognize that their behavior is a choice, not an unchangeable truth about your reality. This subtle mental shift allows you to deal with them strategically instead of emotionally. You no longer feel the need to get even or teach them a lesson, because you understand that their behavior says more about where they are in their own life than it does about you. This mindset protects you from becoming reactive. Toxic people often rely on triggering emotional responses. They pull you into arguments, bait you into defending yourself, and twist your words so you doubt your own clarity. But when you've separated the person from the behavior, you can approach each interaction as though you're evaluating a single event, not the entirety of your worth or identity. You stop taking their words as verdicts on who you are. Instead, you see them as evidence of the patterns they choose to live by. It's like stepping outside of a play you were unknowingly cast in. Before, you may have been acting out the role they wrote for you. The defensive one, the appeaser, the one who's always trying to fix things. But now, you're sitting in the audience, watching them repeat their lines, noticing the same script playing out again and again. And from this new vantage point, you can decide whether you want to walk back on stage or simply leave the theater. Separating the person from the behavior gives you that choice. It frees you from the gravitational pull of their chaos and lets you operate from a place of intentional calm. And when you respond from that place, you're no longer living as a reaction to someone else's storms. You're living as the steady ground beneath your own feet. The most powerful person in any interaction is rarely the one who talks the loudest, argues the hardest, or reacts the quickest. It's the one who can stay grounded when the pressure rises, who can hold their emotional center even when someone else is trying to knock them off balance. Mastering emotional self-regulation is not about becoming robotic or shutting off your feelings. It's about owning them so completely that no one else can use them against you. Toxic people often operate like emotional pickpockets. They look for an opening to reach in and steal your calm. They push your buttons, twist your words, and create tension because tension is their playground. If you take the bait, you enter their game. And the moment you're in their game, they've already won because now the conversation is no longer about what's right or fair. It's about your reaction. The ability to regulate your emotions in these moments starts with awareness. You have to catch yourself in the split second before your reaction takes over. Maybe your heart races, your face feels hot, or your voice starts to rise. These are the body signals that your emotional state is shifting. Most people ignore them, moving straight into fight, flight, or freeze mode. But when you learn to notice these signals, you create a tiny window between what happens to you and how you respond. That tiny window is where your power lives. In that space, you can choose to slow your breathing, relax your shoulders, and let your silence carry more weight than a rushed defense. You can choose to speak slower than you feel like speaking, to keep your tone steady even when your mind is screaming. This doesn't mean you're letting the other person win. It means you've decided not to play on their field. Staying calm is not a concession. It's a declaration that you're in charge of your own emotional climate. Think of it like standing in a strong wind. If you lean into it, you'll tire yourself out. But if you plant your feet and let it blow past you, you conserve your energy. The wind doesn't stop, but it also doesn't move you. That's what emotional regulation feels like in the face of toxicity. They can throw their words, their tone, their provocation, but you remain steady, refusing to let their storm dictate your weather. This kind of control takes practice. It might mean replaying conversations afterward and noticing where you lost your footing so you can prepare differently next time. It might mean rehearsing responses that are simple, calm, and firm so you're not caught off guard. Over time, you'll notice something remarkable when you stop reacting the way they expect. Their influence over you weakens. They may still try to provoke you, but you no longer feed the cycle. In mastering your emotional state, you reclaim the authority over your own mind and heart. You become untouchable, not because people stop trying to shake you, but because you've built a steadiness they can't penetrate. That's the quiet kind of strength that leaves toxic people powerless. The foundation of becoming truly unbothered begins with knowing exactly who you are and what you're worth, without relying on anyone else to tell you. When your self-worth is tied to the approval of others, especially those who are toxic, you hand them the keys to your emotional state. Their praise can make you feel high, and their criticism can drop you into the depths. You become a passenger in your own life, tossed around by the shifting moods and opinions of someone who may not even have your best interests at heart. To break free from that cycle, you have to root your identity in something that doesn't move when they do. Self-worth built from within is like an anchor. It doesn't mean you stop caring about feedback or shut yourself off from relationships. It means you no longer measure your value through someone else's lens. This is especially important when dealing with toxic people. because they often use subtle or overt tactics to erode your confidence. They might downplay your successes, highlight your mistakes, or compare you unfavorably to others. If you don't have a strong internal foundation, their words can seep into the cracks of your self-image and slowly weaken it over time. Reinforcing that foundation requires a conscious practice. You remind yourself daily of your strengths, your values, and the ways you've overcome challenges. You reflect on the things you've achieved, not because you need to boast, but because you need to remember that you've faced storms before and come out stronger. It's about developing a quiet certainty in your own abilities and worthiness, one that doesn't depend on whether someone else notices or acknowledges it. When you are grounded in this way, criticism still registers. You hear it, you evaluate it, but it no longer defines you. You can decide whether feedback is helpful or simply noise meant to unsettle you. Toxic people lose much of their influence when they realize they can't make you question your own value. They can still speak, but their words no longer find a home in your mind. Imagine your self-worth as a fortress. When it's weak, every insult or slight feels like a battering ram against the walls. But when it's strong, those same blows barely make a dent. You have reinforced the structure from the inside out. So even if they keep knocking, you remain secure. And here's the remarkable part. Once your self-worth becomes self-sustaining, you stop needing to convince toxic people of your value at all. You no longer argue for your worth or try to prove yourself to them because you already know. This shift changes everything. You stop chasing their approval and start choosing peace over validation. You stop playing the endless game of earning their respect. And instead, you give yourself the respect they refuse to offer. And in doing so, you send a quiet but powerful message: my value is not up for negotiation. Boundaries are not about pushing people away. They are about protecting the space in which you can thrive. They act like filters, allowing in what nurtures you and keeping out what harms you. The mistake many people make is thinking boundaries have to be aggressive or hostile, as if setting them means cutting someone off entirely or building a wall so high that no one can reach you. But boundaries are not walls. They are doors with locks. You decide who comes in, how far they can go, and under what conditions. When dealing with toxic people, boundaries become your most essential tool because they prevent you from being pulled into situations that drain your energy. These individuals often test limits, sometimes subtly, sometimes blatantly, to see how much they can take from you, your time, your attention, your emotional resources. Without clear boundaries, you may find yourself giving more than you want to, tolerating behavior that makes you uncomfortable, and bending your own values just to keep the peace. Over time, this erodes your sense of self and leaves you feeling resentful, powerless, and exhausted. The strength of a boundary lies in its clarity and consistency. It is not enough to quietly wish someone would stop crossing the line. You have to communicate where that line is. This might mean telling someone you're not available for certain conversations, limiting how often you see them, or disengaging entirely when they start behaving in ways you won't accept. The key is to enforce these limits without guilt. Guilt tricks you into thinking you're being selfish. But in truth, boundaries protect not only you, they protect the integrity of your relationships. When limits are clear, both sides know what to expect, and interactions can become less volatile. The emotional challenge comes when a toxic person reacts to your boundaries with resistance, anger, or manipulation. Or they may accuse you of being distant, cold, or unfair. This is where your inner strength matters most. You have to remind yourself that their discomfort is not your responsibility. Boundaries are not about controlling their feelings. They are about taking ownership of your well-being. Holding firm in the face of pushback reinforces the message that your needs and values are non-negotiable. There's a quiet kind of confidence that grows when you realize you have the power to decide what you will and will not allow into your life. Boundaries shift you from a reactive position to a proactive one. You stop bracing for the next harmful comment or manipulative move because you've already decided how far they can go and what you will do when they try to go further. Over time, these limits create a buffer between you and the chaos toxic people bring. You no longer feel like they're emotional hostage. You start to see that your peace is something you can protect, not something they can take. And in protecting that peace, you make space for the people and experiences that truly deserve a place in your life. One of the most draining illusions we can fall into is the belief that we can fix someone who is determined to stay the same. When it comes to toxic people, this belief often shows up disguised as compassion or loyalty. You might tell yourself they just need someone to understand them, that with enough patience and kindness, you can help them see the damage they're causing. You may replay their better moments in your mind, convincing yourself those glimpses of decency are proof they can change if only they had the right support. But here's the truth that can be hard to swallow. You cannot want their growth more than they do. You cannot do the inner work for them, no matter how deeply you care. Toxic people often resist change, not because they don't see a problem, but because their patterns serve them in some way. Control, manipulation, and negativity might be how they maintain a sense of power or avoid facing their own pain. If you step into the role of trying to save them, you may find yourself locked in a cycle of disappointment, because every breakthrough you think you've reached is followed by a return to the same behaviors. You might feel frustrated, questioning why your efforts aren't working, when the truth is they never agreed to work on themselves in the first place. Letting go of the need to fix them is not about giving up on people altogether. It's about accepting reality as it is, not as you wish it to be. This acceptance is liberating. It frees you from the exhausting role of being their constant rescuer, mediator, or emotional caretaker. It allows you to shift your focus back to what you can control, your own well-being, your own growth, your own life. There's a deep emotional toll that comes with trying to change someone who doesn't want to change. You may start to lose sight of yourself, molding your words and actions in ways that protect them from discomfort, even when it costs you your own peace. You may begin to doubt your instincts because each time they revert to old patterns, they find a way to convince you that you're overreacting or misinterpreting. This is why walking away from the role of fixer is an act of self-preservation. It is you choosing to step out of a game you cannot win. It's important to understand that choosing not to fix someone is not the same as abandoning your empathy. You can still wish them well, still hope they one day see the need for change, but you no longer stake your own emotional health on that outcome. You give them the dignity of facing their own choices, just as you give yourself the dignity of living free from the weight of their resistance. When you finally release that burden, something shifts inside you. You stop waiting for their transformation before you feel at peace. You stop holding your happiness hostage to their potential. And in that release, you reclaim your energy, your clarity, and your freedom to live without being tethered to someone else's unwillingness to grow. There is a moment in dealing with toxic people when you realize that no matter how much time you spend analyzing their behavior, no matter how many mental debates you win in your head, they are still going to act the way they act. That's when the focus has to shift from them to you. It is tempting to think that if you could just find the right words, the perfect approach, or the flawless defense, you could control the outcome. But control over others is an illusion. The only real control you have is over where you place your energy, your attention, and your actions. Toxic people thrive when they become the center of your mental world. The more you replay their words, the more you try to anticipate their moves, the more power you give them. Your thoughts become a stage where they perform endlessly, even when they're not physically present. That's why reclaiming your focus is such a decisive step toward freedom. When you stop feeding the situation with your constant attention, you begin to starve the dynamic that keeps you stuck. You are no longer living in reaction to them. You're living in service of your own priorities. Shifting your energy starts with asking a simple but powerful question: is this within my control? If the answer is no, it doesn't deserve the lion's share of your time or emotional bandwidth. This doesn't mean you ignore reality. It means you decide where to invest your resources. You could spend hours rehearsing what you'll say the next time they push your buttons, or you could use that same time to work toward a personal goal, nurture a healthy relationship, or engage in something that genuinely fulfills you. One drains you, the other strengthens you. The truth is, attention is fuel. Whatever you give it to grows stronger. If you give it to the chaos expands. If you give it to your own growth, your sense of stability and purpose expands instead. Redirecting your energy is not about pretending toxic behavior doesn't exist. It's about refusing to make it the focal point of your life. It's choosing to define yourself by what you build, not by what you battle. There will be moments when the pull to react feels overwhelming, when you want to defend yourself, to prove them wrong, or to set the record straight. In those moments, you have to remember that your energy is finite. Every ounce you spend trying to manage their behavior is an ounce you don't spend on creating the life you want. The more you resist the urge to engage in their drama, the more you'll notice a subtle shift. They may still be loud, but they no longer have the same hold on you. Focusing on what you can control is not a passive surrender. It's an active reclamation of your power. It's the choice to invest your energy where it yields growth instead of depletion. And over time, that choice becomes a habit, one that steadily moves you out of their shadow and back into the light of your own path. There comes a point when you realize that not every battle deserves your sword. Some conflicts are invitations to step down, not because you're weak, but because you understand the cost of sinking to someone else's level. Toxic people often operate from a place of constant conflict. They thrive in tension, they search for offense, and they measure power by how much chaos they can stir. If you meet them on that battlefield, you may win the argument, but you lose something greater, your own peace. Rising above is about deciding that your energy, your dignity, and your sense of self are worth more than proving a point to someone committed to misunderstanding you. This choice does not come easily. Every part of you may want to respond in kind, to match their sarcasm with your own, to deliver the cutting remark that's been burning on your tongue. In the moment, retaliation feels satisfying. But once the adrenaline fades, it often leaves a bitter aftertaste. You look back and realize you've let them pull you into their script, playing the role they needed you to play to justify their behavior. Rising above means refusing that role entirely. You don't erase the harm they've caused, but you also don't let it dictate your character. It's important to understand that choosing the higher road is not the same as tolerating mistreatment. You can be firm without being cruel, clear without being combative. You can enforce boundaries and call out unacceptable behavior without turning it into a spectacle. This is not about moral superiority. It's about self-control. When you refuse to engage in petty exchanges, you send a powerful signal. Your worth is not up for debate and your peace is not up for grabs. Sometimes the most powerful statement you can make is silence. Not the silence of defeat, but the silence of someone who knows their value and doesn't need to fight for it in every conversation. Silence can be a shield, allowing their words to fall flat, unamplified by your reaction. It takes discipline to hold it, but over time it becomes a natural extension of your strength. Rising above also means keeping your focus forward. Toxic interactions have a way of trapping you in loops, rehashing old wounds, reliving past conflicts, replaying the same arguments in different forms. But when you commit to looking ahead, you break those loops. You start asking yourself, not how do I win this fight, but how do I create a life where this fight doesn't even matter? That shift pulls you out of the emotional quicksand and places you on solid ground. In the end, the victory isn't in silencing them, it's in knowing they can no longer pull you down. They may still try, but you've built something higher to stand on, a sense of self that doesn't need their approval, their agreement, or their surrender to stay intact. And once you've felt the freedom of that higher ground, you'll never want to step back into the mud. You cannot stop every storm, but you can decide how much of yourself you give to it. There is a profound freedom that comes when you finally stop chasing the approval of people who are committed to misunderstanding you. For too long, you may have poured energy into explaining yourself, justifying your actions, or trying to earn kindness from someone whose heart is closed. You replay conversations in your mind, thinking of the perfect line that would make them see you differently, only to realize that no matter what you say, they will hear what they want to hear. This is the exhausting truth about toxic people. They often aren't looking for understanding, they're looking for control. And the more you try to prove yourself, the tighter their grip feels. Being unbothered is not about pretending their words don't hurt. It's about deciding their opinion is not the measure of your worth. This decision is not made in a single moment. It's a practice. Each time they try to pull you into the familiar dance of conflict, you choose stillness instead of stepping to their rhythm. Each time they aim a subtle insult or a blatant attack, you choose not to carry it with you. You let it drop where it lands, refusing to give it life by replaying it in your head. There is strength in knowing you do not have to respond to every provocation. Not answering is not the same as being passive. It's about conserving your power for things that matter. When you no longer feel the need to defend yourself to someone whose opinion is rooted in distortion, you reclaim time, mental clarity, and emotional energy. You begin to see how much space in your life was once taken up by battles you could never win because the other side was never playing fair. This shift also changes the way you carry yourself. You no longer walk into a room braced for impact. You stop overthinking every word you say, fearing how it will be twisted. Instead, you speak and act from a place of authenticity because you've accepted that their interpretation of you says more about them than it does about you. That acceptance is the shield that makes you truly unbothered. Not the denial of their behavior, but the understanding that it cannot shape who you are unless you let it. Over time, you notice the noise they create loses its volume in your life. It's still there, but it doesn't echo inside you anymore. The hooks they once used to pull you in no longer find anything to latch on to. You have built a life where their chaos is just background static, something you can hear without being consumed by it. And in that space of detachment, you find a peace that is no longer dependent on anyone else's behavior. A peace that belongs entirely to you.